has Magnus been studying my Chessable course on the anti-Sicilians for black? Or perhaps he's been reading my anti-Sicilians book? It looks like it. He played the system that I recommended against the Alpin in a Blitz game at the World Blitz Team Championship in Hong Kong. In fact, he followed one of the variations that I give in the book to the letter. It's quite extraordinary. Incidentally, with this performance in the World Blitz Team Championship of 14.5 out of 20, Magnus was probably very relieved, having lost 4 games in a row in the rapid play event. But he reminded us that he's still a pretty good chess player. Before I show you the game, quick announcement. The next live masterclass exclusively for patrons will take place on Tuesday the 30th of June at 8 p.m. UK. Tuesday the 30th of June. That might be today, depending when you're watching this video. And I'll be discussing how to assess a position and looking at some positional themes. And I'll be focusing on a classic game played by Alexander Alekhine. Right, let's crack on and look at this game played by Magnus Carlsen and this excellent system against the Alpin. Susanto Megaranto playing white, he's an Indonesian grandmaster, against Magnus Carlsen playing black. Now this is a blitz game, so we cannot expect perfection. Nevertheless, Magnus played pretty well. So knight f3, e6. Now instead of going into an open Sicilian, Megaranto played c3, so looking to play an Alpin. Point of c3 is to cover the pawn on d4 so you can recapture with the pawn and build a strong centre. Now black can play knight f6 here, that's a pretty normal move, and so on, standard continuation. But Carlsen chooses to play d5, and after the exchange on d5, queen takes d5 is a very normal move, but he preferred to take with the e-pawn, and he's played like this before, and this is the system that I recommend in the book, in the Chessable course. So basically black is looking to play with an isolated queen's pawn, and I really like that because it gives black chances to take the initiative, as we'll see. By the way, there's another route into this variation, which is in this position. Instead of knight f3, then of course white can just play c3 here. That's perhaps the most common way of playing the Alpin, and then e6, d4, d5, and white takes here, and so on. It's going to transpose, and now either knight f6 or knight c6. Okay, let's go from the start again. Just a quick recap. Carlsen plays e6, c3, and we're in the Alpin. And then d4. So Carlsen played knight f6, and it's this variation I like very much. If black plays with knight c6 and so on, this is a pretty standard variation of the French Tarrasch, and black normally puts the knight on e7. But I like the more active position of the knight on f6. It's more challenging for white. Bishop b5 check, and you can play bishop d7 there, but Carlsen wants to keep more tension, knight c6. And bishop e7. You can also put the bishop on d6, but bishop e7 is fine. And white exchanged on c5 and knight d2. So this knight obviously can't move to c3, but wants to come to b3 to get control of the d4 square. Castles, knight b3, bishop b6, and this is a choice for black now. You can put the bishop back on d6, but I like this move, bishop b6, because black maintains pressure on the f2 pawn, and you also cover d4 as well. I think I think it's more aggressive than bishop d6. Certainly more challenging for white. And white plays bishop g5. Now, here's a very interesting moment in the game. And perhaps I think I might like a drink of my tea, and I'd like you to have a think about the position. So you have a think, I'll have a drink. How would you play here as black? Cheers. Do you want to improve your chess? Get access to live masterclasses with yours truly? Then subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, and for just $25 a month, you get a newsletter with a test game, calculation puzzles, a monthly opening survey, access to an archive with over 100 opening surveys. And you can join in live masterclasses exclusive to patrons where you can ask me questions directly over Zoom. All for only $25 per month. Do subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess and join the club. Don't forget, live masterclass Tuesday the 30th of June. Patrons, I hope to see you there. Right, now, what's the story with bishop g5? It looks like white could be threatening to take on f6 and then take on d5. Well, here's what I wrote in the book. h6. Black says, I don't believe you. We could also play bishop e6. So those are my exact words. Yeah, bishop e6 is more tame. It's playable, but I'd rather station this bishop on a more active square. And h6 basically calls white's bluff. So again, in the book, I wrote, if bishop f6, queen f6, queen takes d5, push the queen, and in this position, black has excellent compensation for the pawn in the shape of the two bishops and swift development. In the not too distant future, it might be possible to advance the a-pawn to hassle white's knight. Yes, that could be a nice disruptive move. So you can see that black has two bishops here. Very well coordinated pieces. And I think it's just a lot easier for black to play than white. Well, that's certainly what Magnus believed anyway. That didn't happen actually. So Megaranto played bishop h4. Now, what did I write about that? Instead, bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, knight e4. The usual recipe for dealing with the pin, and in my experience, often underestimated. Now, I actually wrote knight bd4, queen f6, with pressure on d4 and on the king side. What a nice position for black. Yes. This idea with g5, in my experience, is often underestimated or just comes as a surprise to a lot of players playing white. They just don't expect this move. You know, perhaps it looks too risky to advance this g-pawn, but in fact, after knight e4, in fact, Magnus's opponent played knight fd4. But with the queen on f6, you can see that the queen covers the king side, is very actively positioned, and well, black just wants to, bring pieces into play. Bishop d7, rook in the middle. I mean, you can see that these pieces are so beautifully placed, and very often there's the option just to exchange off knight for bishop as well. But yeah, well, we don't exchange it off yet. It's such a fantastic piece on the outpost. So this is actually the game continuation. By the way, sorry, I'm backtracking a bit here. h6 is not the only move. I mean, I mentioned bishop e6. I once played a6, and this is also absolutely fine for black. Yeah, I mean, once again, grabbing the two bishops is very pleasant for black. Anyway, Magnus played h6. my recommendation in the book. And then knight e4 and queen f6. So white is already under pressure here. I mean, that's after just 14 moves. You know, you're right out of the opening. That is a tremendous outcome. And, I mean, particularly in a Blitz game, it's very hard to formulate a plan when you're under time pressure. Very hard indeed. And there is no obvious plan for white in this position. You know, if you really want to connect your rooks. But, for example, after queen d3, well, now the h-pawn can fly down the board. That's really dangerous. In the game, white played bishop e2. Okay, must have been nice to see retreat on the board. Magnus just played rook e8. Putting a rook opposite a bishop cannot be a bad idea. Let's just see what happens. Well, this was Megaranto's idea. Bishop g4 to exchange off this piece. I mean, who knows? Maybe he dreamt of putting a knight on f5, but this is already very promising for black. Carlsen exchanged off and then just nabbed this pawn on d4. Why not? It's an extra pawn. I think because the knight is so well placed, then black doesn't need to worry about this g-pawn's advance, and the queen is very well placed. Now white played rook d1. Okay, you need activity, you just want to play a natural move. But then queen takes b2. Rook takes d5. Now this is a typical Blitz game moment. You know, if Magnus had had more time on the clock, then you'd be able to calculate queen takes a2 with 2 extra pawns. It's the computer's first choice. Basically, the computer says black can get away with this. The queen can often just shoot back to e6 and rejoin the king side. But instead of that, Magnus played a forcing move. You obviously saw knight f6 very quickly, forking queen and rook. And there's only one way out for white, and that's to offer an exchange of queens. So Magnus just must have seen, I've got an extra pawn in an endgame, I'll just go for it, instead of risking taking a second pawn. It's a practical choice, and in Blitz you need to play very practically. You need to play fast, practical chess. I mean, I think if white plays absolutely perfectly, then there are some drawing chances. But I think a4 is already a mistake because it's possible for black to force an exchange of rooks. And after this, well, you could say the technical phase begins. If there were just one pawn on the queen side, and maybe white's rook were active, then decent drawing chances. But with 2 against 1, this makes a big difference, and this should be winning for black. So this is the game continuation. Rook c5. Okay, that's a nice solid move. So just stopping that pawn advancing, so no surprises, and it's possible to attack the a pawn. So it just keeps everything solid. g4, yeah, it straightens out the kingside pawns, and before doing anything else, Carlsen brings the king up the board. So the rook is tied to defending this pawn. King f6. Okay, so the typical method of making progress here is to bring the king over towards the queen side, support a pass pawn. So rook e4 stops the king's transfer. Rook e5. Okay, there's a bit of toing and froing. So the king is still prevented from moving over to the queen side. But now, very important move, a5. So this introduces a new plan for black. basically you want to put that rook on b4 and either get a trade of rooks, which gives black a winning pawn endgame, or you win a second pawn. So white has to defend against that. So for example, if king f2, not good enough. Here, and rook b2, followed by rook b4, and that should be winning. Well, I mean, white can still do this as in the game, but okay, that's another story. It'll transpose. So rook e8, yeah, it's the same thing. Rook b8 and rook b4. This is a very important moment. Black should not exchange pawns like this. I mean, king g7, this should just be a draw. And this isn't quite good enough. Basically, having nabbed a pawn, the rook comes back to a6 behind that pawn, should be a draw. So Carlsen played rook b4. Now, this is important. So holds onto that pawn. And the technique for black is to bring the king across and then take this a pawn. This king might even go like this. But basically, once you get two connected pass pawns, then you can give up 1, 2, or even 3 pawns on the king side because you are going to be ahead in the race. That's the idea. So let's see how this works. King f2, king e5. So Carlsen beginning the transfer. Okay, he plays it gently. Instead of just giving this pawn, he plays f6 first. King d5. There's a bit of toing and froing. And in this position, I think that the simplest is just to come over like this. King c5, so now there's a threat to take here. This is most direct. So the king gets checked back. Now if the rook comes here, then you play king c6. So rook f7. Now this turns into a race. But basically it's a race where black is ahead. And well, white can get counterplay, but basically black is ahead in the race. You can see that very clearly. And that wins. But Carlsen played rook b3 first. And then king d4. He had another idea. So similar thing, he's going to bring the king across. Perhaps here. White goes for the f-pawn. And now the king can just come back again. And, well, you can reset as black and still win that position as before. But Carlsen went for it with b5. This was clearly his intention. Now, he wins in just a handful of moves. So his strategy was absolutely successful and pragmatic and clear. Let me show you. So pawn takes pawn. a4. Rook a7. Pawn advances to a3. Now b6, of course that can't be taken yet because of this. But now the king dives in. King c3. And here, well, either white resigned or lost on time, I'm not quite sure. So b7, let me show you what happens. b7, king b2, and you can see that the king is beautifully shielded by the rook, and then you make a queen and rook takes pawn, and that is the end of that. Okay, so what was the problem? Carlsen finished off the game absolutely beautifully. Let's return to the position after b5, a takes b5, and it looks absolutely crushing. It's a really nice idea with the rook just protecting the king, and the king just shepherds the pawn home. But in fact here, Megaranto could still have drawn. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, basically white needs to play a whole string of only moves. You're never going to find this in a Blitz game. Even in a game with a normal time control, it would be very difficult. But rook takes f6. Incredibly, this is good enough. a3. Rook takes h6. White has time for this. The king moves to just support the pawn, and then b6, a2. Now here is the point. It looks like black is just going to grab this rook and it's game over. But watch this, f4. It was crucial to take both those pawns because now white is able to create counterplay. So pawn takes pawn, g5. Okay, you grab white's rook, b7. Okay, the point is after rook takes pawn, then the king can advance to take the pawn. And, well, you have to take it now. King f3. And this is just a draw. White gets there in time. And so on. King f6, g7, and you're going to force the win of the rook. There you go. It was almost a perfect game by Magnus. But listen, as I said, b5 won very quickly, and this is impossible to see in a blitz game that white can still draw this. So, I mean, actually, I think a very, very convincing win by Magnus Carlsen. And don't forget, this is a very nice system against the Alapin. Black has a lot of fun with the isolated queen's pawn, and if you want more details, do check out the book.